lot of people have asked this question to me, that what are some specific things I must do in order to improve my quant score by, let's say, 3 to 4 points minimum. Let's say you're scoring a quant 45 or a quant 46, and you want to get it up to a 49 or a 50 or even a 51, which is the perfect score on the exam. These points will really help you to be able to improve your score by good 3 to 4 points, if not more. The number one thing here is time versus accuracy, right? So when it comes to time versus accuracy, a lot of people are not able to balance the two. They either focus just on time or they focus just on accuracy. But you need to be able to understand that any question that takes you more than 3 minutes to answer the question is actually not going to help you in the long run. It's going to bring out your score by a lot more than you can imagine. I've seen people not have an exit strategy. They take it on their ego, right? And especially engineers, right? I'm an engineer. I know what happened with me when I was solving the exam for the first time, that I just couldn't let a question go, right? I said, I don't care how much time it's going to take me to answer it. I'm going to get this answer. But that I realized is a fallacious approach. It's important for you to not lose sight of the bigger picture. And the bigger picture here is that pacing is the most important thing. If you're not paying attention to pacing, then as I said, you are going to wreak havoc on the score. Given that if your pacing is off, you won't be able to do that. Time or accuracy, you have to balance it. Have an exit strategy of 3 minutes. Anything that's more than 3 minutes, you're better off guessing on it. Educated guess obviously makes sense, but if you can't even make an educated guess, then just simply guess and move on. It's really important not to take more than 3 minutes on any question. Secondly, self-awareness is important. Now, what I mean by self-awareness here is to really understand what are your true strengths and weaknesses, right? You need to be absolutely clear, crystal clear, that these are the topics I'm exceptionally good at, and these are the topics that I'm weak at. Ideally, you should not have any weaknesses. When you start taking mock tests, when you actually even start practicing for the GMAT, you must practice with the intent to master every single topic, right? But I understand the deadlines are looming large. If you have to take your exam in about, let's say, another 1 or 2 weeks, then please understand this, that don't try to overcome your weaknesses on the mock test or on the exam. If you know that probability is a weak area for you, if you know that permutation and combination is a weak area for you, then don't invest more than 40 to 45 seconds trying to get the answer for that question. Self awareness, understand what your weaknesses are, and don't invest too much of time in those questions that you know are your weak areas, right? So ideally there should not be any weakness, but as I'm saying, on the exam, that is not the time for you to try to improve your weakness. That is the time where you want to double down on your strengths and try to get rid of those questions that are tuned to your weaknesses as soon as you possibly can. So the more time you save from those areas that anyway you would have gone wrong, if you would have spent enough time on them, you save some time there and you invest that time on the other questions. So self awareness is really, really important. I've talked about this point with you earlier. I've seen a lot of people engage in this because I think it's kind of, built into our system now because of the education system that we've been through, that we calculate all the way until the end and we write down all the steps, because in school we used to have stepwise marking and all that. It is important for you to keep this in mind, that in most questions, you do not really have to calculate the answer. Especially in data sufficiency questions, you must take advantage of the nature of the question. The nature of the question is you're just trying to figure out if the data that's given to you is sufficient or not sufficient to get the answer. And I'm not saying it will work on all questions, but in majority of the questions, you don't really have to calculate all the way until the end. If you find your scratch pad to be filled up with calculation, then you are definitely on the wrong track. Even the most difficult questions don't require more than 2 or 3, maximum 4 lines of calculation. If you're doing any more than that, then you're definitely missing the point, right? You're over calculating. So number one thing here, especially in data sufficiency, do not try to get all the way to the end by that specific precise answer. Usually you'll be able to get the answer simply by analyzing the statements given to you, but not going all the way until the end. Second, please ensure that you're not writing any more than 3 to 4 lines, or else you haven't really thought through the approach. Think through the approach. As I said, every question in GMAT, irrespective of the difficulty level, can be answered well before 2 minutes. So don't overcalculate. That's another reason why people end up losing out on at least 1 or 2 points, if not more. Fourth, this is so very important, that once you vet the answer choices, once you scrutinize or analyze the answer choices, you're going to find differences there. Differences could be in terms of the range, that the options could be widely spread in terms of value, or it could be that the units digit of the options is different, right? So think about this. When you analyze the options and you find that, okay, the options are widely spread in terms of values, then don't you think approximation is a good idea? Right? Approximate the answers. You don't have to really go all the way until the decimals and calculate it precisely to that digit. It's not important, right? If the options are widely spread in value, then approximation is a good strategy. Another thing that I've seen work really well on quant is that in some of the questions, the units digit of the options would be different, right? Even if the options are very close, the units digit might be different. What you can do is you can simply just calculate the units digit. Calculate just the units digit, and with that, you can get the answer. So both of these things work extremely well on problem solving questions, right? So answers have clues, vet the options, and that might give you some direction in terms of how to get the answer very quickly. And lastly, know, as I said earlier, also different approaches. If you are just solving question with one approach, it is not going to help you. You must get very comfortable with number plugin. As you know, I mean, I know a lot of people don't really regard number plugin as a really good approach, but I can assure you it has been proven to be invaluable on the test. Sometimes the algebraic approach, where you kind of simplify everything and compute the answer in a neat algebraic fashion, that is very time consuming to be practical on the exam. So algebraic approaches don't work. In most questions, in fact, they don't work, especially for the harder ones. Algebraic approach is a disastrous approach. For those questions, using number plugin, getting really good at identifying those smart numbers that can give you the answers is important. And it takes time. There is no one neat, exhaustive list of options that you can apply or numbers that you can use. You have to really get comfortable taking different numbers and trying to see which one works and which one doesn't work. Hit and trial. That actually is one of the most efficient ways of solving 750 plus level questions on the exam. And algebraic approach works well for quite a few questions, but not always. That's why it's important to have, one or at least like two or three approaches in your arsenal when you're trying to tackle questions. If you have just one approach, which is the algebraic approach, you might actually find yourself getting stuck on questions and not being able to answer them within 5 minutes. I'm not sure how many of you guys can relate with this, but this is one thing I've seen most people come to me with, where they spend 5 minutes on the question, but they haven't made any headway because they're just computing and computing and simplifying and simplifying. Whereas with smart numbers, they could have gotten the answer in about 30 seconds. So it is not something that you can learn overnight. It is something that takes time to develop. But the energy, the effort, the time that you spend in trying to develop this skill of thinking of the right numbers pays dividends on the exam. So let's just go through these points once again. One, when you say time versus accuracy, it's important for you to strike a balance. And to that effect, I say that you must have an exit strategy, no more than 3 minutes on the question. Second, self awareness is key. By that, I mean that you must be absolutely clear with what your weaknesses are and not take anything on your ego, right? Don't take anything on your ego. If you know that you're weak with probability, it doesn't make sense to spend 4 minutes on probability questions, because the probability of answering probability questions for you is anyway low, right? Because that's a weakness. So why would you want to spend so much of time on that? In about 35 to 45 seconds, if you're not able to make any headway, you're better off guessing on that question and moving on. Self awareness is important. Double down on your strengths and try to get rid of the questions that are testing you on your weaknesses as soon as you can. That will allow you to finish the test on time, and your accuracy is going to be much higher than it otherwise would have been. As I said, it's not ideal to have any kind of weaknesses, right? When you're preparing for the exam, you should strive to turn all weaknesses into strengths, but don't try to do that on the exam. Don't try to do that on the mock test. It's not going to work. Third, we talked about not over calculating, especially for data sufficiency questions. They don't require that you get to the that you get to a specific answer at the end. Fourth, for problem solving questions, they always have clues. Look at the options. If they're widely spread in value, the values use approximation. If in case the units digit are different, then you just calculate the units digit and you answer the question. And lastly, no different approaches. If you have just one approach, I told you in some cases it might work, in some cases it might not work, and in the cases it doesn't work, it can completely wreak havoc on your exam. So important for you to have a couple of approaches in your arsenal so that you can pick and choose the one that would work for that specific question.